So one of the first things that we have to do when you get to a job is you have to treat the window openings. And the window openings we treat is with Aquaflash. Traditionally, we would take a roll of Aquaflash mesh, we put it in the inside corner, we would do that, we'd do the bottom sill, we'd do the jamb, we'd put a diagonal piece on the end. And DryVit, like we said before, has developed an Aquaflash pre-made corner, which John has in his hand right there. And it comes pre-curved like this. Makes it a lot easier and quicker to put this Aquaflash corner on than to do 3 or 4 individual pieces. You want to use latex gloves or other type of gloves because the Aquaflash, when it gets on you, it's very difficult for it to come off. Yeah, that's the best thing. If you use Aquaflash, it can go directly to the sheathing, or it could also go on the backstop. Where if you use the peel and stick tape, you have to go onto the backstop. You can't go onto the sheathing with it.
So it wraps all 3? Say again? Question?
You can use a 4-inch paintbrush with the Aquaflash. You can use a 4-inch roller. All depends on the preference. That's a 4-inch piece that we're using now, but we would use a 6-inch piece on a 4-inch stud, a 2x4. And this isn't a DryVit requirement, it's a code requirement. The codes tell you that you have to treat the openings, the window openings.
Yeah. Any penetration. So windows, doors, floor line expansion joints. If you remember in Al's presentation.
Hose bibs, any termination behind expansion joints. Like I said, behind that expansion joint, before you put the foam on top, you'd also have that backstop behind there. In case the sealant joint lets go years down the road, the water's not going to get in because the backstop's going to hold it, or the Aquaflash is going to hold it in place.
So the nice thing, back to your original question, as it relates to windows and needing to get the building dried in, you can go ahead and put this on, and Al's mentioned up to 6 months exposure. So they can go ahead and put the windows in and come back in spring, and then you just overlap the backstop right over the top of it. Or if the backstop's there, you can put the Aquaflash over the backstop. So it's fluid applied. So it's blue, as you can see when it goes on. Once it turns black, coat it one more time with a good liberal coat over the top of it, and then let it dry. 2 hours later, stick the windows in and move on. Okay? Any questions?
Dense glass, national gyp, a lot of the sheathings it's all compatible.
Plywood, yes.
Plywood, yes. Yep. Durock, sure. Well, there's probably not a substrate we can't use. I mean, if it's a painted masonry, we can go over it with mechanical fasteners. If it's sheathing type, we can just adhere to it. If it's virgin block, not painted CMU, masonry, we can stick right to that.
But you'll notice too that just like the cut edge of the sheathing, where your flashing tapes and other products won't stick, this stuff sticks. So think in terms of on a project when you're putting the air and water resistant barrier on. Typically you only focus on the areas behind the eave system, right? These products are fully tested to be used behind all claddings. So when you're worried about compatibility, who goes first, who goes last, the foundation, the top of the wall, all the conditions Al spoke of, that can be what you do. So most of the contractors I work with, they bid the entire air water resistant barrier for the entire building envelope, not just behind the eaves. Okay? So don't miss out on that opportunity. But you'll see with Aquaflash, it stays exactly where you put it. Al said, wear gloves.
Please.
You're not going to get it off your hands. This stuff really works really well. And very thin. Yes, Bob?
And you can bid the
That's correct. So you'll find,
These products are so incredible in their engineering and use
uh,
and acceptability and code compliance.
what you'll find is that just exactly as Bob mentioned, send a lead to a contractor twice, send it to the distributor. Well, there's no EIFS on it. I said, did you look at the air and water resistive barrier? There is no EIFS, but 100% of it was backstop and aquaflash. So you have to recognize when you're looking at projects that are specified, not only look at the EIFS package, but look behind the other claddings to make sure that the product's not specified there. You sure don't want to be doing it for free. There's a lot of continuity. Just think in terms of everything that we do, whether it's custom brick or limestone, DPR finish. Name one thing that we do that where the aesthetics or the appearance doesn't matter. You make it blue and you make it black. That's all you're trying to accomplish. And so it's something that, as Bob just alluded to, make sure that you look at every project because it is an opportunity for you, no doubt about it. Any questions about the aquaflash or the backstop materials? Yes? Can you go over base coat?
Yeah, because last time we sold the stuff before the window store and they're gonna put the best flash up at the bottom of the window.
Yeah.
And when I see that gap, that will be.
For the specific situation or example that you presented, the opening should have already been wrapped before the stucco goes on. I realize in some cases that doesn't happen.
Because sometimes everybody to go with the base over the slab because they want to put the window 1 inch outside of the pole.
Right. Still, the per code, that opening has to be wrapped and flashed, and that has to go over. So if we're doing stucco, per code, you're supposed to be putting on 2 layers of weather-resistant barrier. A lot of times that would be our fluid applied, aquaflash on the inside, and then your paper would go to the opening. Okay? Let's say if we're using paperback lath, that would be that process. So that preparation should already be there prior to that being installed. Now, if you've got sheathing for some reason, after that fact, then it still should be wrapped and integrated into that opening so that water can't get behind it.
And because until the window is installed, that gap is gonna be there.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult, guys, and I know where you're coming from. A lot of times you get to the job site and the windows are in. The thing that you've got to be very careful with, you almost have to be very proactive in making sure with the aquaflash, you can send somebody out there with a gallon pail and a roller in the corners and the aquaflash mesh, and you can do everything that's needed from the inside. The day where you can actually show up at the job site when they're completely ready for you and start, that's very tough to accomplish right now.
I mean, after you do the right process, if you want to do the aquaflash over that from the left pass to the base coat, all doesn't look.
I mean, it's going to stick. Again, I don't know what the purpose is, but I mean, it's going to stick. I mean, the thing that, the aquaflash materials and air and water resistive barriers are tested behind claddings, the brick, the block, the eaves. So they're not intended to be exposed indefinitely as a final finished surface. So when you put the system over the top of them, they're going to perform. And what you're talking about is UV exposure, okay? So the key is that should be underneath. People ask about backstop. What's the limitation? What's 30 days, right? Well, that's what all manufacturers post. Our products can go well beyond the 30 days. The 30 days, when you think about you're going to adhesively attach the system, you've been on construction sites. Look at all the environmental dirt, the rain, the mud splashes up on the wall. That's to facilitate, without having to clean the wall, that we can stick to it. If you go beyond that, then typically we address it on a case-by-case basis. Some cases we'll write a letter that it can be exposed up to 6 months. But when it is, it's got to be cleaned, and then a refresher coat of smooth has to be roller applied over the top of it. So that's an example. But I think to answer your specific question, get with Carmine, get with Al on a specific project, show them the exact conditions, and then we can comment specific to that project. Okay? Great question. Any other questions as it relates to the aquaflash and backstop materials?
We also have a VB too, John, which you can run them through.
And something that, and again, I don't want to get into where it's too technical, but here's the one thing from a fundamental perspective. When you open up a set of drawings, when you're looking at a project, and you look at that wall section, is there cavity bad insulation shown? is there not cavity bat insulation shown? The one thing that we offer in our industry is there's 4 code required barriers: air, water, vapor, thermal. In other words, the EPS, the XPS insulation that you put on a building. What you actually do offers all 4. So when we get back to that wall section where there's no cavity bat insulation, that's what's called performance design. So now the vapor barrier, instead of on the inside of the wall, it's now on the outside of the wall. So if you take away one thing today, is when you open up that set of drawings and you look at that wall section that you're bidding and there's no cavity bat insulation, it's highly likely that they're requesting a vapor barrier product. Okay? We have one product called Backstop NTVB, when used in conjunction with the Arc Flash, actually achieves the air, water, and vapor barrier all in one product, one application step. Okay? The fastest growing aspect of design construction today is performance design. So like the contractors I work with, if you open up a set of drawings and you don't see that there's any cavity bat insulation, pick up the phone and have a conversation with Century, with Al, with Paul. And the reason why, when you use the VB, you actually have to have 24 mils of thickness. The easiest way to get there is trowel the first coat, and once that basically takes up where you can't disturb it under thumb pressure, trowel the second coat, you're good to go. It's the way to go. And it is the vapor barrier as well. But here's the thing. Think in terms of, we're doing this wall. Standard backstop, if I trowel it, all I have to do is treat the joints with the grid tape as shown, treat that joint, and then once I can't disturb it, trowel one coat over the top of it, I'm done. But when I do VB, guys, I've got to treat the joint, trowel one coat. Then after that takes up, I've got to trowel a second coat. That means I've got to go around the building twice. You think, well, that's an additional labor step for you. But now what you've done, though, is you've done all 3. The vapor barrier that would have been used on the inside is eliminated, but now the vapor barrier is on the outside. Don't miss that, because that will be your responsibility to make sure that if you're specifying, one of our systems, it's got to be the vapor barrier version, and it's called Backstop NTVB. Just keep it in simple terms. I open up the set of drawings, I don't see cavity bat insulation, or I do. If I see cavity bat insulation, standard backstop, whichever version, smooth, texture, spray that you want to use, you can. But if it doesn't have any cavity bat insulation, then there's high probability that they're going to need a vapor barrier on the outside surface of that sheathing, and that's called Backstop NTVB. Instead of it being blue in color, it's green in color, and it requires 2 trowel applied applications. Any questions about that?
Yeah, the coverages are based on 2 coats.
And the coverage is based upon 2 coats.
Relative to the thermal barrier,
Yep.
you could achieve the same insulative value with just an exterior insulation system?
Absolutely. The mindset, great question, Carmine. And the reason why the construction industry is moving in that direction, think of it in these simple terms. We're sitting inside here today where it's 65, 70 degrees, real comfortable. On the outside, it's abnormally warm. Generally, this time of year, it'd be 0 outside, it'd be pretty common. So if you take the wall section, from the inside, 70 degrees, to the outside, it's going to change 70 degrees across that wall section. So if you think in terms of light gauge metal frame, we pull the cavity bat insulation out, drywall on the inside, dense glass on the outside, whatever cladding, it's still going to change that 70 degrees. On the inside of the cavity, when you pull that cavity bat out, the temperature of the exterior sheathing is only 4 to 5 degrees less than the interior air temperature. All the science is basically showing 100% elimination of mold, mildew, and other performance wall issues that they're concerned about. So like a lot of the firms that I deal with, they're 100% performance design guys. There's no cavity bat insulation involved. Either one is acceptable, but the reason why people are moving in that direction is to eliminate mold, mildew, and other wall performance issues regardless of the cladding. That's why the CI that Al alluded to. When you put foam on the outside, you warm up that cavity. If you eliminate the cavity bat, you warm up the cavity. You don't have a dew point consideration. So recognize the science of construction is changing. It's affecting our industry, but you have a specific advantage when it does go to performance design because of the 4 required barriers, one product can provide all 3 And that's a product that we offer to you. So don't overlook that. But as Bob mentioned, these products are not just limited to EIFS. We have a lot of projects. One we just got done with, every square foot on that project, over 450,000 square feet, the contractor did all the air and water resistive barrier. So trust, that's something that you have to be aware of. But again, go back. If you open up that set of drawings and there's no cavity bad insulation, you better be picking up the phone and asking a question until you understand what you're looking at. Okay? Any questions? Great question,
In
Carmen.
terms of bid, does that have to be designed in the design phase? Or
It's already automatically in there. And what actually happens, a lot of the contractors said, well, the architects made a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. There's two design paths that they can choose from. And so when you make that determination, it's clearly written in the spec. And somebody that's knowledgeable of it, Carmine, you can go in and look, and it'll reference ASTM E96, and the permeance will be 0.1 or less. Well, guess what? Guess what backstop NTVB is? It's 0.008. But you don't have to know that. The key is when you see that there's no cavity band insulation, it's a red flag that until I become accustomed to what's actually happening in the construction industry, I need to pick up the phone and speak with Carmine. I need to pick up the phone and call Al. Okay? It's important to recognize those little things. It's not about just going out and saying, well, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this. Because of those changes within the construction industry, you're going to see some transition, and that's why some of these other products are out there and being developed. But just recognize if we took the approach where we put Tyvek up, wait a minute, Tyvek's not a vapor barrier, so we got to put another product up there. That's another labor step, another product. Well, are they compatible? Do they provide the code required drainage? Are they fire tested as an assembly? I mean, I can go on and on. The simple fundamental fact, prescriptive and performance is something that you're going to be dealing with. Okay?
Just one more question.
Sure.
If I'm an applicant and I want to do some value engineering and we're outside the design phase, is it practical that you can make these changes prior to build, or all has to emanate that design phase?
Well, it really depends. Great question. I'm of the mindset that if we are doing our collective job and actually speaking with that design professional, that already takes place. So once that happens, then we communicate that through you to the contractor base and they know what to expect. The second part of that is a lot of the contractors will wait till within 2-3 days before bid, Carmine, I need you to call this guy, I want to use this. Well, number one, the design professional is not compensated for changes. I've been told by some of them they have up to 3,500 different products to specify, right? So if I go in 2 days prior to bid and 10 guys want me to research a new product, how many times do you think that's going to happen when it's uncompensated? Not going to happen. The right way to do is bid the base bid and then submit a voluntary alternate for consideration. That's the right way. And I think the other thing, guys, when you're bidding projects, think of those same terms. Go with the base bid and then build from there. What typically happens in the markets that I cover, they'll open up the spec and the contractor that's really knowledgeable knows exactly what they're doing, they're bidding exactly what was specified. Then somebody else will come in with a base bid of standard barrier system, and then X for moisture drainage, X for the vapor barrier, X for custom brick. Guess what? Guess who gets scope review? The guy with the lowest number. I can show you some examples where the guy went in with the base bid and came out and got scope review, and their number was higher than the competition, but they got scope review. So you have to be careful with what's going on in the marketplace. But the one thing that you have to be aware of, guys, is things are changing. And that's why these new products are out there, as backstop NTVB. Think in terms of the AquaFlash. Anybody that's used flashing tape from another manufacturer on a project, and you show up the next day, 2 weeks later, and it's all peeling off, what do you have to do? You got to replace it. So at $1 a lineal foot, we just threw away because they didn't cover it with the cladding the same work period that they put it up. AquaFlash stays exactly there. The product mix that we try to offer the contractor base is in response to make your job easier. So if you don't understand where that product fits, ask the question. It's not always about price. It's always about taking a look at what's going to be the most economical, what's going to be the most competitive, what's going to make your job easier, but recognize within those code changes and CI requirements, you're going to be using a different mix of products. So, any other questions? Great questions, comment. All right. What we're going to get into next is the limestone finish. The limestone finish can be used with any of our systems. It's basically put over the top of a cementitious base coat. When you open the bucket, we've already pre-mixed it just to keep the noise down. But it's a 2-coat application. I'll repeat, it's a 2-coat application. If you think in terms of freestyle that we've actually in some cases troweled smooth in the past, limestone has even got a smaller or finer aggregate with more aggregate in it. You'll feel like it's really stiff even though it's the right viscosity. When you trowel the first coat, you burn it on as tight as you can get it. So there's one of two ways to do it. You can put the first coat on one day and come back and put the second coat on the next day. And for anyone that hasn't utilized it, that's typically the best approach. But ultimately, just as Al was showing you, again, you just burn a tight coat on, one after the other. If you want to put it on during the same work period, you trowel it on the first coat identically to what Al is doing right now. And then when you can't disturb it under thumb pressure, about 30 minutes, then you put your second coat on and lay that trowel flat and pull it really tight. You don't float it. You rub it open, and it'll give you the exact limestone texture. 9 times out of 10, when people are having trouble with limestone, they're trying to float it and trying to overwork it. Again, it's built into it, guys, to make it really simple from an application standpoint. Trowel it on tight, and then just rub it open. So you hear that noise, the trowel noise? A lot of times I'll get a call and a guy will say, oh, I'm having trouble with limestone. I can hear it, trowel some on. I can hear in the background, just like you heard Al's trowel. You can hear it. You're burning it on. They'll put it on so loose that you can't do anything with it. So you just basically open it up. But I really like for a guy to start out with just running 2 coats. 1 coat one day, 1 coat the next. Can you use a primer with it? You can. Don't have to. Generally, I like the suction so it takes up quicker and you can move along a little bit quicker. Okay? Any color, just like any of the other finishes. And it seems to be growing in popularity. People like that limestone appearance. So again, when you're trowel applying 2 coats, the published coverage is based upon 2 coats. Recognize you got a little bit more labor in it than you do the standard finish, right? So you're going to have to bid a little bit more for that. Yes? That's the second coat. First coat that you already see on the wall surface. He's actually, when you're going through and you're rubbing it, you're just rubbing the texture open. When you say float it out, just float it like you would, just like a regular sandblast or quartz. What you'll see is swirls in it. You'll see when after he opens it up, he'll clean off his float like he's doing right now and just lay it down. Steel trowel will do this.
Burn it with the trowel.
What will happen?
I'll do this. The first coat.
Where's the other trowel at? What it'll do? It'll leave a burnish right on the surface. Okay? If you don't burnish it, you can use a stainless steel trowel, but what happens is it starts to dry, then it'll start to drag and you can't get it to lay down. No. You're saying what kind of a trowel now? It still wouldn't matter. What will actually happen is when you push on the shank, it basically is going to actually rub that on the surface. So the key is you want to use, if you're going to use a float, even though you're not floating, use a plastic float. Now, if you use this, you can, but you can't be rubbing on it. Because you'll see, just like it's burnished up there, a lot of times you want to burnish it. But what you'll have is you'll have dark discoloration, you'll have some light and some of those things. Generally just an NKJ, the white blade with a red handle, or just like the float that Al's got, something really soft. And the reason why is when you have wall imperfections, if you really have to rub to get it to move the texture, then that's when you get into problems. The softer floats will get in there and actually move the aggregate to develop that limestone texture. Sure.
I've done a lot of limestone finish.
Sure.
I can also use the 1.0 behind it, and then I put the limestone finish over it.
You could do some of those things. Once you get into just recognizing the fundamentals of the product, there's a lot of advanced things that you can get into, and that's a prime example of that. Sometimes we'll use sand pebble, let it dry, and then come back with freestyle and do the exact same thing. There's some really neat things, and then I'll show you with the Tuscan glaze. The one thing that you want to try to get away from, and I know it's difficult to see back there, but if you can see the burnish, can everybody see the burnish? What happens if you've got 4 or 5 guys manipulating the limestone and one guy burnishes it? Now you've got something in the middle of the wall that shows up like a sore thumb. So you want to try to keep it as easy and simple as possible. You know, if it's just a couple guys, not a big deal. But you got somebody new and he's trying to work it and doesn't understand that. The limestone's a little bit more challenging, but the key is, the very key thing that you want to do with limestone is burn it on tight. Use that aggregate, cover the surface, and then work it open, and then it's just going to be a lighter touch over the top of that. Okay? Any questions about the limestone? 2 coats. Published coverage is based upon 2 coats. And so if you haven't used it, the easiest way to find out how to use it, run 1 coat, and then run the 2nd coat the next day. After you kind of get the hang of it, run your 1st coat, and when you can't disturb it under thumb pressure, run your 2nd coat, and you can do it in the same work period. Whichever you start for that job, do it the exact same way all the way through. Don't use a combination of both. The other thing that I want you to think about, let's say if we have scaffold 3 frames high, and we're going to run a wall. First thing I would ask you, do you see limestone, a piece of limestone wall that's 3 stories? No. Limestone is broken up into panels. 3 by 5, 4 by 8, 2 by 8. Okay, it needs to be broken up as in limestone. Just think if we go through and we leave that joint and come back and try to tie back into that from scaffold to scaffold, you're going to read it. So it should be broken up in a limestone pattern. And that's something that we need to make sure we communicate to the design professionals. So if you see a project that's specified with limestone and it's not broken up in manageable panels, then that's a conversation that needs to take place with the design professional before you move forward. Okay? Next product we're going to, as an accent to the limestone or the custom brick, taking the Tuscan glaze. That's the color prime. It's here somewhere. Tuscan glaze. Is it this one or this one? So just like the product we use for shading, what's really neat about this product is you can get a modeled appearance. Typically like to use a pan and a double pressure roller handle, meaning instead of the typical paint roller handle, is it basically has an arm on both sides. And then you use a beveled core. You can get them at Sherwin-Williams, Home Depot, Lowe's. That way when you're putting the materials on, you're going to get an even amount of millage. Because if not, with these glazes, you're going to have heavy light, and you can't get away from it. Okay? So for today's purposes, we're just going to use a brush. And as you saw, Al mixed it a little earlier. You always have to continually agitate or mix the glaze. And so the quickest way to do it is just working at least 2 people. Dip it, roll it. And then as it relates to manipulating it, you want to grab a couple of those dry rags too, Al. You could use a sponge. You can use a terry cloth towel. But what I prefer to use yeah, it's right down there on the end in that cardboard. I put it there. I like to just use a piece of plastic that's cut by 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. And what you do is once you get started, initially what you're trying to do is get the plastic wet with the material. Just wrinkle it up. So just a regular trash bag, piece of Visqueen, and then just wrinkle it up. And then as you go over the top and get it wet, what it'll do is it'll just pull the color back off. And the reason why you can do that is that you're going to get a variation of color, and you can blend in over an entire wall. And it really looks phenomenal. Real simple. A lot of guys will take the terry cloth towel and try to do it, a little at a time. Well, it takes forever. But once you get started and they just keep rolling, then it's just a piece of the plastic. And you can overlay and blend in, and you'll get the exact modeled appearance that you're looking for. Really, really easy to do. Just a piece of plastic. If not, you can use a sponge. But the big problem that you have in doing this, if I don't do the exact same pattern, I'm not going to achieve the appearance. There, look. So a lot of times I'll carry a rag, but more importantly, the best tool is just a piece of plastic. Roll it on the wall surface. Once you get it wet, just keep overlaying, going multiple directions. Wrinkle it up any way that you want, and pull it right back off. It's that simple. Okay? Any questions about the Tuscan glaze?
Is that the final finish?
It's over the final finish. So in other words, you could use it over limestone, you could use it over sand pebble. Primarily you're going to see it be used over limestone, freestyle. So if you think in terms of the freestyle where we do like a Spanish lace texture or a slip trowel, well, that really looks sharp. And so I really kind of like it with those two. That's my personal preference. You can do it with sand pebble fine, but the key is a double pressure roller handle with a beveled core, so that as I start to roll, then I'm actually getting rid of that roller mark, so I'm not leaving a vertical streak. You want to have it on there just evenly, just like you said, well, it's all over the place. The plastic will blend it right in for you. And just go multiple directions, okay? You can spray it. I think the key is that once you spray it, you got to be careful where you don't start seeing stuff roll down. But they say when I do like to spray it, let's say if we have a light fixture, or if we have, how when you see on a home where you see water run down from the copper and you see that stain, okay? Little trick is taking a little bit of this water and just put something, just a fixture. Is that your water bottle there, Al? Mind if I use it? And then virtually what you can do is just imitate a light fixture. And virtually what you can actually do is just create that stain and just do that a couple, 3 times. And then virtually what you'll have is that same streak that you'd see off of a copper roof. Really, really neat stuff. Really neat stuff to do, work with. The finish that the gentleman back here described, where you put the sand pebble on, then put limestone or freestyle over the top, then come back with this as an accent. Really, really neat, guys. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. The key is when you get into it, just use that plastic and blend it right in. Okay? Any questions about the Tuscan glaze? Go ahead, Lee. Want me to trowel it this time, or? Okay. I'll clean that up. Next finish we're going to run is Terraneo. So any base coat that Al showed in his training session can be used. Needs to be fully dry. Then every color of Terraneo has a pre-chosen color-coordinated primer. The primer needs to be applied over the top of the base coat. So you're going to see these colors all use the same primer. So that base coat's got primer over the top of it. You can roll it, spray it, however you want to get it on the wall surface, but it just needs to be primed. Generally, I like to do it at least 24 hours prior to. Some cases when the sun's shining, 4 hours later, you can go over the top of it. But ultimately, color-coordinated primer over the top. Terraneo, let's see if I can get some of those flakes. Basically has mica flakes in it. So people will ask, well, can it be spray applied? There's one of the mica flakes. Okay? Will that go through a hopper gun? No, it will not. Okay? Terraneo, and you'll notice how Al trowels it, use the mica flakes as the determining thickness. So he'll trowel it, and then the last stroke will be one directional, because if not, it'll drag the mica flakes, and you'll have tracking visible in the finish. So you just trowel it on. So notice on that downstroke. Take a downstroke out and step back for a second. So like this, that's where that mica is dragging. Okay? So you just use that as a gauging mechanism. You lay your trout about a 10-degree angle off the wall surface. Normal textured finish is like this, right guys? You're pulling it down tight. With the Terraneo, the last stroke, you notice how Al's trowel just goes like this. It's really close to the wall. Think in terms of white coat. What do you do with white coat? Trowel's not up on edge. It's laying flat. Okay? Then at that point, all you're wanting to do is lay everything down. You see voids, you just work it in. You can use a stainless steel trowel as Al is using. You can use a plastic float, but you don't float it. If you float it, you'd hear that rubbing sound, right? All you're trying to do is just lay it down nice and smooth. That's it. So it's real easy finish. People assume that it's real difficult to work with. The key is the guy troweling it on, not the guy manipulating when it's all said and done. The guy putting it on is the secret. Say again, please. Looks great on detail. It's a little bit harder, but the key is, and what you actually do with it, trowel it on, and then kind of let it take up where it kind of gets that bite. And just like you would ornamental plaster, instead of taking your trowel and pulling to the arris, what do? You pull away from the arris so you don't knock the corner off. You push back in away from the arris. So again, it's no different than doing ornamental plaster. But yeah, there's a lot of projects where they're doing shapes and trims and bands. Say again, please. Sorry for the trowel noise. Okay. Right. So again, when you look at each one, it's really probably, as far as being beautiful, I think it's really a neat product. Some little accents and that sort of thing. There's a color Black Beauty, one's Snow White, there's one's called Whistler. Really some neat finishes. There is a variety of colors. We even do special matches. So generally, for the most part, starting with standard colors, just like Ford. For their brand wall, when you walk in, they wanted a special blue. We matched it. You just got to give us a little bit of time. If they're wanting a special color, we can do it, but we have to submit what that color is desired, and then see what stones are available, and then we can tell you whether or not we can do it, okay? But generally what you're going to see, a lot of the standard colors are more than sufficient for what everyone needs, but it's a great accent. It really is. Neat product. Yeah, Bob. 90. Yeah, Bob.
Large project should be ordered as one production batch.
Any finish that you see up here should be ordered as one production batch, right? And I think the key is, you know, just like if you're going to change elevations and you run 2 buckets short, don't run that elevation until you get the balance of the material. Box it, right? We mix it all together and then apply it, and then you're not going to see it at that outside corner. But these are the kinds of finishes, you know, on something like this, just imagine you're 2 pails short. You don't want to be 2 pails short. Now, 90 square feet, guys, is based upon flat walls. What happens if we use your example and we're doing ornamental shapes, right? Are you going to get 90 square feet? You're going to be like me. You're going to drop more. You're just going to. You're not going to get that same level of coverage. So what we would strongly encourage for any project, typically you have to submit a mock-up. Do a mock-up. It's to your benefit. Why? You can anticipate the coverage that you're going to get. Not what I get, what you're going to get. And so that you have a pretty good idea that going in, it's not going to be 90 square feet. Because of those ornamental shapes, it's going to be 85, or it's going to be 72. It's all going to be relative, specific to that project. Flat wall, you're going to get 90. Right on it. Right dead on it. Okay? Any other questions about Terraneo? How many guys have used it? Anyone here? Anyone put up Terraneo finish thus far? Okay.
That's not new?
It's not new, but it's been around for quite a while, but it's really a neat finish to work with. It really is. All right. Say again, please. I'm sorry for the background noise. I wasn't able.
What's the difference in the price of the resin stock?
For each, you probably want to speak with Century on pricing as it relates to that, and they can explain to you what it is, freight, location, and all those kinds of things. But just speak with the distributor, and they can help you with that. Okay. Now, we're going to do the Marestone and Stone Mist next.
Good.
Or which one do you want to do next? Does that sound good? Huh? Okay. Next finish we're going to demonstrate is Stone Mist. Ceramicized aggregate in a clear matrix. The finish requires a color-coordinated color prime regardless of which application process. You can either trowel it 100%, trowel it smooth. You can trowel and spray into it, or you can spray it 100%. Now let's start with the first one. Typically, when you're trowel applying it, it's basically corridors or areas where you want a really durable material. You can take a quarter. We'll give Al just a second. Sorry about that. So it's a really durable product, but just recognize if you have, let's say we're going to trowel it over the top of this block. Guess what it's going to ghost? Anything that's there on the substrate. So in other words, if you're not familiar with doing white coat, it's the exact same process if you're going to trowel it smooth. You're going to have to lay that trowel flat, otherwise you're going to have trowel marks. You're going to have chatter marks where you put the trowel up on edge instead of holding it flat. Second process is if you trowel the first coat, getting it down nice and smooth, then spray into it, it increases your coverage because you don't have the bounce back of just 100% spraying it. But again, you can't have any trowel marks or chatter marks when you spray over the top of it, because when you do, they're still there. Otherwise, you can actually just spray apply it. 75% first coat, 25% second coat. So what we actually have, one example of a piece of equipment, probably the most common, is just your typical hopper gun. Typical hopper gun This is a little bit different one, but this one's got interchangeable orifice tips. Generally for stone mist, I typically like the 5/16. If we're going to do Maristone, the tip size should be 3/8, just because the different size and the shape. So this is just interchangeable. Obviously pre-color prime the wall, as we've done. Generally I like to have an inline air regulator, even though there's one on the compressor. I like one right here. And we typically will set that for our spray pattern. This is the first time we've used this one, so we'll just have to play with it a little bit. It's also got a control where it controls the needle. So if I put a 3/8 inch orifice in, this needs to be set where that tip is 3/8 of an inch away from the back side once the trigger is completely compressed. Okay? Whatever the size of the tip, that's the distance once it's compressed completely that it should be back away. And all you do is adjust this. Okay? If it's a Marshalltown Goldblatt, all you got to do is pick the 5/16 and it's already predetermined. You can't change that. But if we control the air with an inline air regulator, then we can control our pattern. And once we get it, then you can set it and it doesn't change. When you hold the hopper gun, you'll see us when we spray. Just think of holding that all day long with that weight in there. Cant the hopper gun and hold it just like this. Now, think in terms of when you spray. You've seen someone spray, they'll go up and they'll spray just like this. Okay? So if you look at that spray pattern, which we'll demonstrate here in a second, you'll have heavy material and then you'll have light material. When you overlap, if you don't take the light just right exactly over the light, then you've got light over heavy. Guess what? You'll always see it. But let's say if we spray like this in that same pattern. So we start in a circle. Guess what? It takes away the light and the heavy. So you always spray with a hopper gun, even if you're going to do a popcorn texture. Just can it. It's always spray in a circle. It'll also get more material on the wall. And it'll eliminate reading those heavy and light spray areas. Huge tip. Always in a circular motion. Okay? The pressure, it's a starting point, so you look at the product data sheet and it'll say if it says 20. Don't be concerned about if it's 15 or it's 30. I can show you 5 different hopper guns with the compressor and the gauge says 30 or it says 25. What if the gauge is damaged? So once you get it set, then basically you leave it. All it is just a reference tool, and then you've got to adjust it from there. What's your hopper gun to start with? Get some clean water here. Let's use some. Always put some lubrication, some water in there. And before you spray on the wall, I've got that piece of cardboard just for that. Get you a piece of cardboard. Mesh box is good to use. And test spray on the cardboard prior to spraying on the wall surface. We're going to be kind of tight. See if we can get one. I guess that's all we have. It's going to be kind of tough to reach that. Go ahead and we'll make it work. You can pull just a little bit more, Carmine, where I can get 2 or 3 feet. So just like on this one, there's a air regulation gauge. So in other words, when I open that wide open, it's obviously way too high a pressure, right? So then you just keep adjusting down. Huh? Might get a little more water on. So just like when you see right now, it's on the verge where it needs a touch more water, so it'll flow a little bit better. But your gauge, and that's the other reason why I like to leave this wide open and then control it with a gauge that I can lock in. What happens if I bump this when I'm spraying it? Then it's changed my pattern. And so generally what you do is when you measure the amount of water that you're going to add, let's say if it's 4 to 8 ounces, then every pail, if you put 4 ounces in, every pail gets the exact same amount of water in it. Keep in mind that for stone mist, the color is achieved by the ceramicized stone. The matrix is clear, even though it appears white when it goes on. Typically, as you're spraying, you're going to use like a mesh box, and whoever your partner is that you're working with, they can shade the other areas that have been previously sprayed. Always spray with the wind. Let's see if we're spraying outside, and where we're from, it's always windy. You almost actually have to tent the scaffold. So if I'm anticipating working off of a scissor lift and the wind's blowing all the time, you're always going to have a problem, right? So you basically got to build scaffold, tarp it in, and then work with that. But ultimately, when I spray one panel, I don't want to get it on the other one, so we'll spray it, but then just hold a shield there so we don't get the overspray on it. Fill me up now with a bunch. You trying to get us some more?
Wait there.
Go ahead. So again, just hold it. If you're right-handed, just hold the hopper in your left hand and just can it, and then go ahead and spray it. I think they're working on just a little bit more hose for me, but it's better. But you can see that it's real close as it relates to that. We get just a little more. I just can't quite reach that panel. Well, I've got to be able to reach that and then down there, right? And then the binks. But ultimately, it's pretty simplistic. But again, the real tip is just kind of can it, hold it with your both hands, so that you don't get tired and you keep the same spray pattern. Good? Thank you. I want to hold that up on that brick. Think in terms when you start to spray a panel, if that's your full spray pattern, you're going to start up here to get your full spray pattern or your full spray pattern across that surface. Now, the question is that one coat? No, it's not. One coat consists of a horizontal pass and then a vertical pass. In other words, a crosshatch. So then you take the same spray pattern. Ready? purpose of the color prime, most people associate that with read-through. All your goal is if you color prime it, you just want to put texture on. That's it. You're not wanting to paint it. And so what most people will do when they start to spray, look at my distance away from the wall. If I start spraying out here, so you see very little material. So everybody will have a tendency to do this. Guess what? You'll always read it. The front of that hopper gun should never be closer than 16 inches to the wall surface. All you're wanting to do is apply texture. You're not trying to color it. It's already done. Okay? Any questions about stone mist?
Misty, John.
Say again? It's going to depend upon which of the three that you go. So that's going to range anywhere from 75 to, let's say, 110 to 120. That's why it's critical with this. Your maximum coverage is probably going to be with this particular application here. The secret, just like when you look at it, there's no trowel marks or that chatter mark where that trowel's up on edge. Trowel's like this. And then you can just spray into it and move on. Okay? So again, the guy that's actually troweling the first coat is the key. First thing with the Maristone, much like the others, it requires a color-coordinated color prime. The coverage is 60 square feet per pail. No more, no less. If you spray less than that, or in other words, get more coverage, then you're going to read the prime through. It goes on with 2 coats. 75% the first coat, 25% the second coat. And when Al sprays the second coat, you'll be able to watch the larger stones that basically stick on the wall surface. So you step back just a little bit with the second coat. Now I want to kind of collect. Let me lay something down there, Al, to kind of collect some of the larger stones. I can use a piece of cardboard, lay it down there. We got the larger tip in it. So when I went outside and cleaned it out, I've got the largest tip. So it's got the 3/8 in it. So just like with that particular gun, when Al started to spray, your control knob, that's where that piston has to come back to let the larger aggregate through. So yes, it's a 3/8 inch orifice, and then you have to adjust that to get it back to let the aggregate go through itself. So. Let me give you some more material. That's enough. Now you'll notice that Al sprays straight up and down in straight lines. If you're really not sure about being able to see those spray lines, then you want to spray in a circular motion to eliminate that. So Al's all the way back here from where the tip is to the wall, not up on top. You got to let the spray pattern complete. You never get in trouble out here. The closer, if you're wanting to see the material go on the wall, that's when you're going to get into trouble. Stay back that 18 inches, 20 inches, and then when I'm talking about the larger stones, just so that you can see. Can you see all the larger stones? So what you actually do is when you get the larger stones, if you want those larger stones showing, then you wait till the finish, just like right now, if I touch it, you see all the acrylic on my fingers. You wait until you don't, when you touch it, 10, 15 minutes where you don't have acrylic on your fingers, and then you just take a little step back and then the larger stones, and all you're actually doing is blowing the larger stones on the top of it. But you got to do it consistently the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
your main issue, your main problem was if it's windy, and you get closer when it's windy, you'll model it. You just have too much material in one spot.
Just
I like the
spray one where you model it right there.
model one.
Yep.
Close the first coat. My last coat's further back.
The key is that when you're there, you can always put another light over the top. What Al's going to show you right now, where you get too close and it models it. I don't care how many times you spray it, it's never going to go away. That's good enough. Now can you see it? That will never go away. Ever. What's that? What? Can I spray more over the top of it? Think in terms if it snows tonight 10 inches and there's a tree limb laying in the parking lot. Unless we were having, wind where it drifts, then you'll see the outline of that stick. It just magnifies it. So the more you spray, the more the model appearance that's there. How do I fix that if I've got a project? Let it completely dry. Skim it with NCB. Reprime it, respray it. If you already know that you got a problem right now, just like Al did, take your trowel, cut it off. Let it dry, respray it. Okay? Always stay back. Never get into a problem. Once you get up close and you make the modeled appearance, it never goes away. Then when the sun gets on it, then it really shows. Okay? The real key is getting that nice adjusted pattern on a piece of cardboard and then keep your consistent distance. It's really a beautiful finish. Any questions about Ameristone? By the way, the reasons why we chose, these colors were chosen, it used all the same color prime. So as far as trying to get those to dry. So you could want red, you want black, blue, whatever. Every one of these finishes have those as it relates to an accent. But the real key is you can see, and I went to clean it out, just imagine where we look at a sample and we don't have all the large stones on there. That last pass is just to put the large stones on. That's it. Okay? Any other questions about Ameristone? Next finish we're going to talk about is Reflect It. And this is where I really need everyone to pay real close attention to what I'm going to tell you. Reflect It is an ultra smooth finish to mimic a metal panel appearance. So if you think in terms of white coat, you think in terms of ornamental plaster, Reflect It is the ornamental plaster of eaves. The level preparation as it relates to the steps that you normally start with, and then apply a product called Skim It to make it ultra smooth, is the secret. Everything else goes really easy from there if you get those preparation steps done. So the first step in the process, you put your foam system up, you sand it, you do the best foam job you've ever done. All your arises are nice and crisp. All your aesthetic joints are nice and crisp. Then your base coat and mesh. You base coat and mesh. You know how when you see trowel marks and you see the mesh pattern, that cannot be visible before the primer goes on. And if it is, it will never fly. It will show through. Every time. To spray, apply, reflect it, there's specific equipment that you have to have. So we're going to start with that. The first is a Binks pressure pot. Carmine, can I get you to step up so I don't hit you for a second? Okay. It's dual regulated for your air as well as for your fluid. There is no other piece of equipment anywhere that's acceptable to spray this material. So it's an investment of buying one of those units. Somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 depending upon the one that you buy. It also requires a Binks 2001 or a 2100 spray gun with a 66 SS fluid and air cap. So when you take a look at these, there's SS printed right on the fluid cap. There's SD printed right on the air cap. Never take this off. I'm just showing you what it looks like on the inside. The air cap does a dual purpose of protecting the needle as well as the fluid tip. When we set it up and start running water through it, I will show you how to make sure that there is not a problem with that tip. Because if there is, do not move forward until they're replaced. Okay? When I buy a Binks gun, I buy an extra needle, an extra fluid cap, and an extra air cap and have that with me at all times. What if I have a problem? I can immediately pull those out, put a new one on, and keep right on going. It's also a good idea to have a second gun in case something happens. The pressure pot, even though that they'll want to sell you 50-foot hoses, 25-foot hoses, what you need is 12-foot air and 12-foot fluid supply. I prefer clear so that I can see the material flow. I can see when I clean it out that I've got it cleaned. Okay? So not real expensive, but just 12-foot hoses. So if it comes with 50-foot hose, have them cut them, put new ends on. All you want is 12-foot. Just imagine with that supply hose and it's 90-degree day and that's laying out on the concrete. What's it going to do? 50 foot. 50 foot of hose takes a whole 5-gallon pail just to prime the gun. All you need is 12 foot. Same way when you're working on your scaffold, you're going to move this with you versus dragging the hose everywhere. Okay? In addition to that, you want liners. They come in a box of 10, and you always use liners. Just a plastic liner, and I've already put water. I'm not going to pull it out because we already pre-primed it with water to speed the process up. And that's the minimum equipment from the Binks and the sprayer. You need a compressor. It's not the size of the tank. It's the output of CFM or SCFM. Minimum of 12, no less. If you go to any equipment supply house, they never have one. If you call ahead and see if they've got one someplace, then maybe they can relocate it, but it has to be at least 12 CFM. The fluid cap and the air cap is engineered to work with at least that amount of volume of air. Anything less will not work. So in many cases, when Al and I will go to, I'll give you an example of one in Pittsburgh. Al goes, don't have the equipment. I go the next time. And I get there, they have a compressor that's 6.1, won't work. It has to be at least 12 CFM. It can be more than that. So the one that we're going to use here is 15 CFM. Okay? At least 12 CFM. That's critical. Generally, what you're talking about is those dual regulated Carpenter compressors. Not a big tank, but just the output so it can keep up when you're spraying. From there, then we get into the specific DryVit materials that are needed. Base coat and mesh. Once that's on, then you have to skim the base coat again. It has to be perfect. If one step will cause a problem, this is it. If you don't get the base coat right, there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to correct it from that point. That base coat has to be paint ready. If it's not, then you can't move forward until it is. Highly recommend that you use Genesis, either a dry mix, Genesis DMS, or Genesis wet to get that nice creamy surface. And then trowel that over that surface with that trowel very, very flat. A lot of guys, you don't have to, but some of us don't have the skill set to get rid of those trowel marks. Actually take 100 grit sandpaper, not 80, not 120, and sand the base coat after it's dry. touch up any irises, the corners, the aesthetic joints. Now, as it relates to rustification or aesthetic joints, only V grooves, not square, only V. You still get the exact same appearance, but this is a hand-applied material. If you can imagine that square joint, how do you get to that inside corner and snap a line? You can't do it. You want a V groove. You sand the foam and then cut the V groove after the fact, so the profile depth of the joint does not change. You use the hand cut method of applying the base coat and mesh. Anybody that's done ornamental plaster knows what I'm talking about. If you're actually running a cornice mold and you push it through, use the hand cut method. If you don't, what happens? Knocks the iris off, right? So you basically got to go through, base coat, skim it. If you see any mesh pattern or color whatsoever reading through the base coat, you got to skim it again. Let it fully dry. Once it's fully dry, and you're happy with the results, that if you painted it, it would be exactly like you wanted, then you come back in and you apply a product called Skim It. Imagine taking a piece of 100 grit sandpaper, which base coat would be, and rubbing your hand across that surface. Skim It, applied like a level 5 application, will take it from that 100 grit sandpaper to like smooth, like a desktop. That particular material can only be applied a 32nd of an inch. It requires 2 coats. So all you're doing is you're not fixing flaws, you're not fixing corners. All you're doing is taking it from a sandpaper-like texture, in other words the base coat, to a very smooth surface. Then you check it. Any scratches, any marks. If it's down in the brown coat, the Skim It's not going to fix it. Now here's the key. If you see a flaw that can't be fixed at that time, you have to sand back down through the Skim It to get to the base coat, fix the base coat, let it dry, and then reapply the Skim It. If you apply the base coat over the top of the Skim It, it will blister. I will repeat, it will blister. Do not apply base coat over the top of Skim It. Okay? That point, once we've got it sanded, then we let it completely dry. Just because you sand it, think in terms of Durabond 90. You put it on and you do a patch and you sand it. Well, you still have to wait 24 hours for it to dry. It's got that chemical set, but it's not dry. Same thing. Just because you sand it doesn't mean that it's dry. So then you have to wait for it's fully dry. Then you come back and you have to spray apply a color-coordinated primer called Color Prime. Must be spray applied. Repeat, spray applied. Not rolled, not brushed, because the brush marks will read through that pearlescent coating. So what you do with the Color Prime, you open it, you mix it, and then we'll demonstrate when Al comes back. He's got his on cup, and this would be a mandatory additional tool. This is called a number 4 Zahn cup. How many times when you've went to paint something, paint a room at home, how do you know if the viscosity is right? What if it's too thick? What if it's too loose? This is what's called a portable viscosity meter. It's a Zahn cup, number 4, and it says number 4 right on it. Okay? What you basically do is after we mix the Color Prime, we submerge it, and then we pull it out. And as you watch your watch, the stream will continue to run. As soon as it breaks the stream, that's when you measure it. And the material should be between 25 and 35 seconds. Okay? Number 4 Zahn cup, not a 2, not a 3. Just as an example, if you took a number 2 Zahn cup to get the same measurement, you'd be holding that for over 10 minutes. It's got to be a number 4 Zahn cup. They're about $100. The easiest way to get one is on the internet. Just order one, it'll show up at the front door. Some of the Binks manufacturer or actually distributors will have those that you can order. They'll try to give you a plastic one. You don't want the plastic one. It has a different surface tension and it won't give you the same measurements. So it's just a number 4 Zahn cup. So we actually go through, predetermine on the primer. Once we basically get it to the right viscosity, an additional item that you need are paint strainers. The sock, in other words. Just think of your car or your truck that has a pearlescent coating on it. It's the same thing. if you have dried material on the side of the pail and you get it in, and when it gets to the gun, look at that small tip. This is going to atomize it, the size of a pinhead. I'm talking about a needle. So if there's a bunch of trash in there, or off the side of the pail, or dirty water, guess what happens? It plugs up the tip. So you've got to use a sock. So even your water that you put in, put the sock over the top, pour the water through, pour the coatings through. In every case, when you're going to put it in there. Okay? So you have to have those. The other thing that I would give you as a tip, they always come with a label. The reason why that label's on there, what happens after I use it the first time? So I take it over to a bucket, put it in the bucket, and I clean it, and I pull it back out. Well, which side did I have turned out? Consistently pick one or the other. Either leave the label on the inside or the label on the outside so that you don't screw up and turn it inside out and put all the trash back in the pressure pot. So you need plenty of paint strainer socks. Okay? And then typically after I use it, then I'll just come over and just hang it on the side of the pail and just make note that I always try to leave the tag on the outside. That's just the way I do it. You can do it however you'd like. Then, I'm going to set this down on the floor for a second. At that point, we've already put water in the tank, let it run through. And so now I want to pull the liner out of the pressure pot. Get rid of the water, reinsert the liner, and then put my sock in. Now obviously the area that we prepared for this today so we could show you several different things, the primer's already on, okay? So what we're going to be doing is putting the actual reflectant materials in the pressure pot. Everybody still with me? It's a lot to remember. Here's the easiest thing. If you do a reflectant project, who are you going to see? You're going to coordinate through Century and get with Al so that they go through and do your own mock-up so that you know exactly the steps. If you don't understand the value, you will, of having that event. In every case, do a mock-up so that you absolutely understand what it's going to take to achieve that. Don't do it on the job site. That's not the place to learn. Make sure that the guys that are going to be working on that job site are the ones that work with Al to make sure they understand the steps. If they've got any questions, if you need to go through it again, go through it again. Make sure you understand every step. So now what we're actually going to do is Al's going to, before you mix that, Al, for a second, let me show that. Just so that, I know it's kind of difficult to see, but this is normal. I'm going to walk through for a second, and I want everybody to see how the reflectant looks. Okay? You don't see any of the pearlescence. All right? Let me walk between you if you don't mind. It's normal for the pearlescence to settle out of the reflected. Okay? So everybody can see. See the separation. Now, when Al starts to mix, stand up for a second and just watch the material. Let's do it on top of that bundle of foam. And immediately you'll start to see the pearlescence come to the top. Okay? Sorry, Ron. You will never get a consistent color. It'll always have a swirl appearance. It's like that, chocolate and vanilla ice cream cone. It's a combination of that swirl.
And you don't high-speed drill it either.
Not a high-speed drill. You'll notice that Al's just using, like the old BM1, just a smaller version with a variable speed drill. That's all you need. The important part, if you've opened it for the first time, is that material will be settled to the bottom of the pail through shipment of one of these. So you need to mix it, let it sit, and then remix it. You don't have to overmix it, but just mix it. So let's, typically the viscosity meter that we'll demonstrate here in just a second, remember what I said, you dip it, and then you watch your watch. And it should be between 25 and 35 seconds. The product data sheet will say that you can add up to a quart of water. Generally, I've never had to add more than 8 ounces. If you think that you've got to go more than that, then I'd be asking some questions. Okay? So now when we take a look, I'm just going to set it down so that you can kind of take a look at the material. Can you see the silver color now? And that's what it should look like. Okay? So you've got to mix it. Make sure that you get that paddle all the way to the bottom and get all that material off the bottom of the pail.
What about those bubbles?
Doesn't hurt a thing. It's just mixing. Okay? So when I strain it, people will ask, well, I'm going to pour it through the strainer. It's going to strain everything, as you'll see here in just a second. Okay? Any questions about the mixing? Now, we're going to demonstrate the design cup. Who's got a watch? One of your phones can actually turn the timer on. You got one, Tom or Carmine, that you can watch for me? Sure. Here's how you use it. The right way to use the Zahn cup, first thing I typically do is just we'll dip it in water. Just as a reference, I'll tell you when. Now watch. Just look at water, how quickly it goes through. It's usually about 7.5 seconds. Ready? Carmine? You ready to start? Say when. Okay. So watch. So as soon as it breaks the stream, not when it empties out, but when it breaks the stream, it's usually about 7.5, 8 seconds. Okay? All right, so now, but here's the important part, because most people will think that it's got to be completely emptied out. So you do the same thing. You submerge it, and then when you're ready, say ready, and then I'll just pull it. Okay? So I'll tell you when it's about half, and then you tell me where we're at. Okay, we're about half. Okay, so the key is you go through each one, but you go through, and what will happen, people will look at it and say, well, when I just shake my hand a little bit, it gives the false impression that it's breaking the stream. So you kind of have to be kind of steady-handed. But ultimately, it's not going to run completely out. So when we checked it yesterday, the material was right around 30 seconds. Okay? And that's called a number 4 Zahn cup.
$110.
If you're going to do any painting at home, how do you tell if the material is too thick? Right here. After you use them once, that's what you'll be using going forward, just to make sure that you check your paint. Okay, so I was looking for that. I can get it. So now, what we're ready to do is take the tank. Got my sock in place. Pour the material. Then just take the sock, pull it up. And then I just take the sock because I want to reuse it, usually for the same work period, and then just rinse it out. And I'll typically, just to see if there's any trash, when you look at the inside, see the stuff on the inside of the sock? Just a little bitty thing can actually plug up that tip. So always make sure, even when you put water in, just use the sock, and I've got the tag on the outside. Then I'll typically just lay it, after I rinse it good, I'll just lay it across the pail to continue to reuse it. All right. As far as your other remaining reflectant, put your lid back on so it's not exposed to heat and the sun. Take the tank lid, set it in place, move it around so that they don't align. Then we're ready to take it over and hook it up. Now we got air. Yeah, we got air though. Just shut it off. No, just shut that off, just so it's closed. I've got air. Now what you do, let's set it up on a bucket so that they can see it. Dual regulation. This is your fluid flow, this is your air flow. Typically just shut your air completely off and then start screwing in. You can start out at about 15, and what we're going to do is, because your gauge, never trust the gauges. I've been on some, the gauge will say 2, some of them will say 35. I'm going to show you how to overcome that. All that is a reference tool. So when you start, put your spray gun on the edge of a bucket. And so just like right now, even though you can't see it, I'm going to spray a little water towards Al. But you can actually see it coming out of the gun, right? Can you see the water? Okay. And what we're trying to do, the first thing we look at, I don't have any air on so that I can check the needle and the tip to make sure it's spraying straight. As I continue to pull that trigger, then it's going to start to feed the reflectant materials to the gun. So all I'm right now is just getting the water out. Once I actually convert over to the reflectant, which it just did,
7.5.
then virtually you just want to spray out with that, holding that gun perfectly level. You want to come out about 7.5 inches, and so it's real close right there. Okay? And you want it 7.5 inches. If you want to look at the gauge as a reference point, then you can look at it. Then once you get it to where it's 7.5 inches, then just turn that nut in. And for that material, it'll be the right amount of material flow. Got a little something in the tip. It's got something in the tip. Go ahead and turn it up. Is that air on? No, the other one. Turn it on up just a little bit. Down a little bit now, Al. Okay. So that's how you control that. Then you look at the gauge. And for that particular gauge, it's X. That's all it is a reference tool. So when you look at the product data sheet and it says that the fluid flow should be on 12 pounds, it's going to be on 12 pounds if it's 7.5 inches. But it's not uncommon for those gauges not to read accurately. Then turn the right valve, which is your air disbursement, up to 40. And then I'll show you how to adjust that. Okay, I'm going to get that other piece of cardboard set over here. This one's covered, so we need, just grab that one behind you. What I try to do is, for whatever color that we're using, use something so that you can see the spray pattern. And just pull the trigger. Wait a minute, I don't even see it. There's material on there. It's that fine. Okay? So what I'm trying to do is, when I look at that spray pattern, I'll get real close so that you can see it. From 16 inches away from that wall surface, I want all the atomization, in other words, the particle sizes, to be identical. So just walk over there so that they can see that. Just by happenstance, 40 is really close. And then I'm going to adjust it up and down a little bit to show you. Can you see how well it's atomized on the right-hand side of what he's showing you? That's what you're shooting for. Now, the other thing that you do, this is your, if you're wanting to spray like a little ARIS or a little joint or something, this is your air valve where you can cut that down without changing anything else. Always leave that wide open. This is the needle for the fluid flow. Never touch it. Leave it alone as the factory setting. The one on the top, let's bring that back over for a second. What it does is adjust from a circle to an oblong. So when I start messing with the top, now I'm looking for a 16-inch oblong. When I go just the exact opposite, for the top knob, now I'm around. Our goal, once I get the atomization right, is to adjust this when I'm 16 inches off the wall, that I've got an oblong spray pattern that's 16 inches in height. So all we need to do is leave this open, leave this alone, and adjust this just for your spray pattern. Okay? That's it. Now, what you have to recognize, so we've got it pretty much where we want it, is that the other important part of this particular spray equipment, unlike an airless, is that this basically, this cap and that fluid cap atomizes the material 5 times before it leaves the gun. There in the center is your fluid. On either side of the fluid, there's 2 air tips that do this on either side. There's one in this ear, there's one in this ear, and then also when you take a look at the fluid cap, to swirl it around 360 degrees, there's one here, all the way around, and a second all the way around. It atomizes the material 5 times to get it that thin. And so the important part of it is when you went through the process, every time that you start every day, you do the same process. If you're getting larger particles, or if it's not 16-inch oblong, then one of the tips are plugged. It never gets paint on the inside of this. But if it's not spraying correctly or a half moon, then something in the spray cap is plugged up. You can set this to where the ears are like this, or you can do it to where it's like this. That's what I typically do. And then I just change the position of the gun. So when you're spraying, recognize your heavy, light, and light. So when you start spraying, if this is the panel I'm going to spray, you start up here. You go past. Now here's the point. Remember earlier when I said, when we were spraying Ameristone and Stone Mist, we're not painting the wall. All we're doing is applying the texture. Reflected is identically the same. If you walk up here when I'm spraying, I'm not trying to get it on you, you will actually see that you can see the pearlescence flying through the air. All I'm doing is putting pearlescence on. This isn't about painting the wall where I come up and do that. You see what I sprayed so far? Do you see that? You don't. You stay at all times 16 inches back, and you do a crosshatch. So as I go through, just nice and steady, just relax. Always keeping the gun perpendicular to the surface of the wall. I'm not doing this or this. See the overspray when I do that? Always keep the gun perpendicular. Complete the first step, and it takes 2 coats. You have to do 1 crosshatch, and so this is the second half of the first spray coat. Well, wait a minute. Can you see the coating over here on the Terraneo? Wait a minute. Well, I can read. There's 2 crosshatch coats. If I make the mistake and try to paint it just like I did here, it's always there. It's thin coats. If you've got it atomized, you've got it dialed in, you've got to do 2 crosshatch coats. That's the secret. Okay? But we're only as good as the surface prep. So Al did a heck of a nice job of getting this nice and smooth. And if you don't have it nice and smooth, you don't put primer on. You don't put the reflected on. And that's how it works. Okay? There's a lot of steps to it. But trust the resources are here to make sure everything goes well. You can't deviate with this. It's like ornamental plaster. There's certain steps that you have to follow. Once you get that dialed in, you're golden. You try to start on your own and not understand the steps, there's going to be all kinds of problems. Okay? Any questions about the reflected? Really neat product. So I'll just go ahead and spray the second coat. Surprised somebody didn't ask. What's the coverage for this per pail? 900 square feet. See how thin that is? When I open it up, you'll say, well, we didn't hardly use any material, and that's correct. It's so finely atomized. Okay, great question. Remember when I talked about limestone? Do you ever do a huge wall that has limestone that's 30 foot tall? With reflected, the maximum panel size is 5 by 5 or 25 square feet. So that means a panel that's 5 foot wide, 5 foot tall, or a panel that's 3 foot by 7 foot. Okay? It can't be a panel that's 7 foot tall. You can't reach it because you'll have an overlap. So that means it's got to be broken up just like a metal panel with rustification joints. And it cannot exceed either 5 foot by 5 foot or basically a dimension, or in other words, a square foot area of 25 square feet with the tallest vertical dimension being 5 feet. Okay, great question. Yes?
How much cost more than the regulations?
Say again, please.
How much more per square foot cost?
Great question. Now, here's the right answer. And the question was, how much per square feet? There is no exact answer until I have the following 4 items. I need a rendering, I need a floor plan, I need wall sections, and details. Okay? And here's why. Well, is it union? Is it non-union? Is it 6 stories? Is it 1 story?
1 story.
Okay? The point would be, if you're probably in that range, in other markets, probably somewhere between $30 and $35 a square foot. Okay, now, if we're talking about union, 6 stories up, okay, that's why I'm saying, remember when I talked about the rendering, elevations, wall sections, floor plan? Why floor plan? We've got a project in Pittsburgh. They've specified all metal panels and brick. We talked to the design professional, and they came back when the project's almost completed and wanted to switch the main entrance to reflect it. Ryan, why? He said, well, I just need a budget number. Ryan, there's 4 items that you owe me before we even discuss that. He sent them through. Guess what the first thing I saw on the floor plan? Double radius. The reason why he called us, the metal panel manufacturer looked at the elevations, did not look at the floor plan. They did not recognize it was a radius. And so, to answer the question, I knew one contractor that has the experience to do it. I said, if you're willing to work with them, great. If not, We're not interested. We're not going to be involved. Only one. Not because I'm trying to tell where the work. What we did, guys, think in terms of this being a perfect radius. And they're going to frame it with metal studs. What about the flat areas in between? You know what we did? We framed it like this, like a stop sign. And then cut all the foam after they field dimensions. And guess what? It turned out beautiful. This type of product is negotiated work. You have to decide in your own mind, if I want to do a level 10 product, and I can basically do that and make the commitment to learn the steps. There are several firms that are doing it. But then we have some that'll bid a project, never have done it before, ask the question, and then they come back and then they're struggling all the way through. All I'm saying is it's a great product. You can see the material works very well. We've got everything defined. But you've got to make the commitment for your guys to learn the steps. And if not, then this isn't the right product for you. If it is, it's negotiated work. Yes? The warranty on any of these finishes is determined by the system that goes up. Now, when we talk about that, standard warranty is typically 10 years, and that's industry-wide. If you use Trimco sealants, as Al mentioned in his presentation, we can bump that up 2 years, and the warranty includes the sealants. If Trimco spec 1, 3, or 4 sealant is utilized, that's one. If we're doing a project, commercial, light commercial, we'll actually warrant the building forever if the building owner will come in at the end of the warranty, have a third-party firm off of a list, do an inspection, perform any maintenance, we'll reissue the warranty for another 10 years. At the end of 20 years, same program exists. We're the only manufacturer that offers any kind of warranty that's similar to that, regardless of cladding. That's a huge value. It really is. But ultimately, you're motivating the owner to maintain the building. Yes? No, it's regardless of where it's at, the warranty is identically the same. Our products are basically engineered that they are flexible enough to work in the coldest environments as well as the warmest environments as it relates to Arizona. That same warranty offering would exist in Phoenix as it would in Long Island. Okay? No limitation to that whatsoever. All right? So great question. But recognize as it relates to the reflected, question comes up, what about color fastness? Century has made a huge investment in utilizing a pigmentation called Stratotone. That pigmentation gets you a much more color fast offering versus the standard pigments that are used by all the other competitors in the industry. So Bob actually works within that program for us. In most cases, let's say if you utilize Stratotone pigments, you can get a warranty like on Best Buy Blue, currently 5, 7 years, 6 years. Okay? That color won't fade. Standard pigments that all the competitors use, they'll fade within 9 months. So, again, our goal is not only to support you, but to support the end user with the best available technology in the market. And so trust, just like Reflected, guess what the pigmentation is for Reflected? It's Stratotone as the base pigmentation. Okay? What other questions on the Reflected? Go ahead. Can it be done in black? We've got a color that's, yes, we've done black, we've done white. I think I showed some of you some of the white projects that we've done. Yes, sure can. The darker colors are going to show more imperfections as it relates to your surface prep. The one takeaway is your surface prep has to be first class. And so trust, the firms that are having success, they've made the commitment. Was the first project perfect? By no means it was perfect. But getting everyone to understand that base coat is the secret, then moving forward, everything else works out really well. Al's kind of jumped ahead a couple steps and already put the material the fresh material back in the pail. So now what we're actually doing is we're going to repressurize and actually get rid of the material and clean the gun. So this is just as important. So even though we're going to spray, which is a much quicker way to deliver the material to the wall, if you go 3:30, then you better at 2:45, you better be stopping and cleaning everything out. Because you've got a huge investment in this equipment, and if you leave it as is, once you screw it up, then it just screws everything up. So 2:45, you start cleaning it out, you repressurize it. At that point, turn the air side of the equation completely off. Leave the fluid on, but all we're actually doing is we don't need to spray water everywhere. You can run the risk of trying to pump some of this material back in the pail. I don't like to run that risk where I'm going to ruin a whole pail. So I just basically spray in, increase this one a little bit. And all I'm doing is just running water through, okay? So I'm already switched over to water right there, okay? And run that water till it's nice and clean. Then I can still see with my clear hose, I can still see that some of the material sticking on the side of the hose on the inside. Then I'll take it out and I'll run flush water through the supply hose both directions until the hose is completely cleaned out. There is something in that tip. All right, guys. There are multiple versions of backstop. So the fundamental version is called backstop NT texture. Texture must be used to treat the joints. And if you're going to use the smooth or the spray, then you're going to have to spot every fastener. If you trowel apply after you treat the joints, you don't have to spot the fasteners. Now, if the fastener is reading through after you troweled it, then you would have to spot it. So the fundamental start, let's see, where's that? I'll just dip it out if I don't see it. There it is. Is with the texture. Again, it's a trowel applied viscosity. It's thicker. And so it's intended to treat the joints. And all you got to do is pre-position the grid tape and just fill that. Okay? If we're going to use the smooth or the spray, you've got to come through and spot all the fasteners that may exist. Okay? You've got to pre-spot them. Before you move on to the next step, you have to be able to walk up, take your thumb, and if you can move it and it's on your thumb, you're not ready to move on to the next step. So generally what typically happens, you start spotting fasteners, treating joints. In about 2 hours, you can, still wet, but you can twist your thumb and you're ready to move forward from there. Recognizing that's the case, if I'm going to use texture over everything, I don't have to spot the fasteners, treat the joints. Once basically they've set up, then all I basically have to do and you're done. Huh? You say you want to try it? But the key is what you're going to find. Well, why do we have multiple options? Not every project's the same. Is it summertime? Is it winter? Are you in a tent enclosure? Recognize if you've got trowel skills, most firms that have got trowel skills, they don't spot fasteners. Treat the joints and trowel and you're done, one coat. Okay? If we have a large project that's not downtown and our skills with some of the manpower that we're using don't have the trowel skills, then we can actually go through, treat the joints, spot the fasteners, and spray over the entire wall surface. Now here's the key. Most people think, well, as soon as you walk on the job, you need to be spraying. No, it's a big mistake. You need to have enough area so when I start spraying, I don't stop. If you have to shut that gun off, there's no productivity gain. You think in terms of what we call craft time. What's craft time? Craft time is basically every time I touch that trowel to the wall, That's craft time. So in other words, if I spend 50% of my time carrying buckets to the place that I'm going to work, and I'm not actually touching the wall, that's not the goal. The goal is to be on that wall, touching it as many times during that work period so you get more done. Okay? So the nice thing about spraying, so in other words, I'm working with Al, I may go for 2 days just treating joints and spotting fasteners. And one day, he sprays it all. One person. Huge productivity gain. However, if I'm working downtown, and just think of the material with the wind blowing, cars. So Al and I were involved with a Reflect It project in Pittsburgh. Literally, the scaffold is sitting here, and the parking lot is here, right at the edge of the scaffold. No tent enclosure. Guys, we're not spraying. Oh, no, no, you're not spraying. They would have painted every car in the parking lot. Okay? A little bit of common sense goes a long way, but the reason why we have different variations, if you've got that project with a lot of large walls, I can go through and spot those fasteners. Then Al can come back with an airless, with the backstop spray.
Are you grabbing that sheetrock and then put it to the...
Okay. Let me set this over here.
Is
So
that
which
not
is the-
sick or what?
So which is the right fit? It's project specific. Now let's say, as Al mentioned during his presentation, let's say that someone's never done any of these, but they can take a paint roller, treat the joints, spot fasteners, roll 2 coats. Now the one thing that I would caution you with any manufacturer's material, you've got a fiberglass matte face sheeting, it's got a lot of suction to it. When you dip that roller into the smooth and you take it to the wall, you know how I was troweling from there to there? When you roll, you might get this and then you have to reload. So look at your craft time. If I'm rolling, I'm spending 50% of my craft time dipping, 50% on the wall. When Al starts spraying, 100% of the craft time is spraying material. The only thing that's going to slow him down is just changing to the next pail. If I'm troweling, guess what? 100% of the time. But the key is that if we're going to spray, we have to be on a project where we can cover, we can control it, or we're out in the country someplace where the overspray is not going to affect every other guy on the job's car or truck. Okay? So you've got a wide array of options. So if you typically spray and you're a waterproofing contractor, good fit. That's what you do every day. If you're a plaster and you want to trowel apply, I can show you by the time that you get set up, I'm going to be way ahead and already have it done. So a lot of the skilled plastering firms, that's what they do.
You can't hand apply it this fast.
Okay?
And I'm a big hand applying guy. You just can't hand apply it this fast. Equal.
The key is it's job specific, and that's why we have multiple options. It's just like Rapid Dry 3550, 5075. Take a day like today. Somebody said it earlier, well, we're out there working, but here's what happens at night when the temperature of the sun goes down, the temperature drops and gets cold again. If you take the Rapid Dry 3550, we could stick the foam, rasp it in the same work period. As long as you quit by 3:30 or so, the base coat and mesh will dry before it freezes. You can't work up till dark, but with a little common sense, it'll do that. Yes? That's the other thing. That's where the skill comes in. So just like when Al went through, notice rather than trying to apply it in one coat, what do you do? Thin coats. Okay? If you take the same material And I try to, and there's millage gauges that, you know, we'll share with you and that sort of thing. So you dip it in and you see what your millage is. And okay. The important part is that everybody thinks that you're trying to paint it. You're already delivering the material. Well, wait a minute. Well, no. Thin coats. Crosshatch it. And you'll move right along. You can use the millage gauge, but it's real simple. Can you tell that the sheathing's covered? It's covered. Just thin coats. So
7,000 square feet a day with this.
I'll put it different.
That's a lot of square footage.
But if you can do 6 or 1,000 square feet, would you set up this equipment to spray 250 square feet? Don't think so. It's not a good idea. But if you've got 7,000 square feet, once we got it ready, guess what? Spray it in one day.
You can hand this up to the guy above. This is on the ground, and everybody just keep on spraying.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have to look perfect. And I mean, this is just your air and moisture barrier.
So the key to answer your question, skill set as you get into the person that's spraying, it's important that they have those skill sets, just like doing reflected or any of the other spray applied finishes. So that's what DryVit offers. When most of you guys have worked for Al for almost 30 years, maybe some of you longer, you get the resources that when you buy that pail of exactly the options that you have to apply it. If you're having challenges in the field, share those with us. We continue to look for other products to make your life easier. And Rapid Dry 3550 is an example of that. If you take the standard base coat on a day like today where it's 47 degrees and it's going to be 23 tonight, you run the risk of having efflorescence. Not with the Rapid Dry. So, I mean, those are the types of things that you're going to see from us. Look at the cost of the materials, as Al said. You look at the coverage. And so, you know, they can play games with the mesh, 48-inch roll versus 38.5, utilizing a Rapid Dry, a true Rapid Dry. The Rapid Dry not only sets in 30 minutes, it dries in that 4 hours. Look at your other fast set products. They set, but they don't dry. So if you've got questions, you've got a lot of available resources. Carmine, Al, Bob, myself, you've got questions, pick up the phone and give us a call. We're readily available. On a day like today, we're not as available because we're working with you. But when you need something, leave a message and we'll get back with you. So what else did we leave off? Anything that we didn't touch on? Anything that you would like to discuss?
Why private? Overall, why private? How do you guys coverage, price, warranty?
Several different things come to mind. Okay, the thing that you're typically going to see is we're always looking for new markets to utilize our products and systems. If you think in terms of what the current construction market is, and each one of you has experienced this, when you bid a project, what happens? They start the project late, but what about the completion date? Does it ever change? Never changes. Who's the last one to finish up on the project? You are. So you've got to make up that time. The important part in doing those kinds of things and being respectful, you have several different options of products. And why I say that DryVit's different, the investment in new technology, ways that actually make you more productive. Actually, your 8 hours of invested time on that job results in more craft time versus messing around and only doing 50% of your time rolling versus what Al just showed you, covering 7,000 square feet in one 8-hour period. That's huge. Might not be the right fit for every project. Reflect it. Think in terms of your market. Has it become more competitive since 2008? Absolutely. I've discussed that with each of you. You have to recognize, much like drywall that replaced plaster, if you're truly been in the plastering business, I can remember the time when the older generation said that drywall will never last. It's the same way with the EIFS industry. New technology is going to continue to occur. Reflect it, Terraneo, limestone. You're going to see your market transition to new finishes. You can adapt to the change, or you can continue to play the public bid situation where it gets more competitive, you can't make any money, and ultimately work on a negotiated opportunity with one of these finishes. You've got to learn something new though. But why DryVit is because the support is there. Not only do we have the product, we'll show you how to use it. Okay? Any other questions that anybody has? I'll speak from personal experience. There's a project called Allen Plaza in downtown Indianapolis. The Alucobond panels were $160 a square foot. Not installed, not delivered, no sealants, no flashing, that's just the panel. Our panels were installed for approximately $27 a square foot, everything included. Okay? So if you don't think that there's not opportunity there, every time that we talk with a design professional or a developer, they're very interested. The biggest challenge that we collectively face is the commitment on the contractor's part to learn the products. You can't go out and get a 35,000 square foot project and start with Reflect It. Biggest mistake that we both could make. The ideal project is a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot project with flat walls that are no more than 5 by 5 panels. And so typically when I work with firms like yourself, that's the first thing that we want to target. We want to work through. That shows me what you understand, what we don't understand, and then collectively respond to that. Then work on the next one. Then once we start to get our legs under us on how we understand the exact steps, then we can do that 10,000 square foot project. It's the same thing with limestone or Terraneo. Guys, when you have something new, just because it's specified and you've never done it, don't take that project. Take the project that has a little smaller, and try to identify one, and you'll come across one and do each of these materials and see where the learning curve is. Then make a decision in your own mind. The first question that I ask that firm after they've done a couple projects, do you want to continue? And I'm very serious about that. If you're not interested in getting over the learning curve, or if your guys aren't interested, then maybe it's not the right fit. And Reflect It is an example of that. But if you get over the learning curve, the opportunity is tremendous. It's unbelievable. So just like the other, was it yesterday, I got a call on a 35,000 square foot Reflect It opportunity. Made 2 calls in Nashville, left with a 10-story and another project. It's not hard to get the conversion. The hard thing is getting the people that want to make the commitment to learn the products. To tell you how hard it is, 2 of our competitors won't even sell the product because of issues. They haven't walked through, as Al just demonstrated you, the right equipment, the right tips, the right settings on how to do it. We'll show you that. But you have to demonstrate on your behalf that you're willing to learn the products, and then if it's the right fit and you want to continue to do it, trust, there's more Reflected out there than you'll ever want to do. But again, I view it as a negotiated opportunity. Yeah, is it $30? That sounds like a lot of money, but not in comparison to the $160. So, but it's more ornamental in nature. What other questions do you have about any of those? But trust, we're here to help. We're not here to say, hey, this is what we offer and leave and walk out the door. When you do one of those projects, you'll see someone like Al or I. Not because we want to dictate what goes on, we want to make sure that things go well and you're successful on that project. So.
Plus, we're an American-owned, American-made manufacturing facility. So when someone says that DryVit's more money, you have to compare apples to apples. You have to compare coverages of our materials to coverages to theirs. Yeah, we may be more, but we probably offer more in the bucket. We may be more, but we probably have more square footage per yard on the roll. You just got to do your due diligence when you're bidding these jobs, and just as far as the coverages are real important.
All you have to do is look around in this room. Look at the commitment that Century has made. Not only in the materials, as Bob mentioned, Stratotone, as far as pigmentation, instead of waiting 2 weeks, it's readily available as soon as that you call and order materials. They've made a huge financial commitment to DryVit and to you. So you have to tell us how we can help you. Well, we appreciate the opportunity today, guys. Your attention and patience with us has been very appreciated. Al, you guys have anything that you guys want to finish up with? Carmine?
Everybody take a look, must be present to win. Must be present to win. Everybody that left early, then we pull again.
939-9402.
Thanks, everyone.